We're going to watch this video together, and I admit, it's a reaction video that's about 3 minutes long. I just want to really point out to my audience how toxic some of these talking points, narratives, commentator, pundits, whatever, the shit that's coming out of someone's mouth is always disagreeable to an extent, but some of this stuff is absolute garbage. So let's check this video out. Arguably, Ben Shapiro had lost credibility the day he started talking. But I'm not going to lie. I found a lot of things he said in the past to be respectable. I can take what you're saying, and I understand where you're coming from. And, you don't sound like a total demon. But this was the definition of improper characterization, unresponsible pundit commentary, disgusting, irrelevant, anecdotal propaganda. So let's watch this together.
I want to tell you two stories. The first story is from my days at UCLA when I was an undergrad student. So you're going back 20 years now. The Muslim Student Association, an organization that has routinely supported Hamas and Hezbollah ideologically and otherwise, put out a student news.
This viewpoint is so common. When you hear they support them ideologically, they don't. They support the one notion that brought about this whole thing, that Palestine deserves its land, and that Israel unrightfully took the land from Palestinians through a British mandate. And there's this historical mischaracterization that even Benjamin Netanyahu did on his, not on his show, on Jordan Peterson's show. Screw Jordan Peterson, by the way. I'm losing a lot of my people that I watch right now. And I flew across the country to go listen to Jordan Peterson. But this is my last video. Actually, that one's not up yet. But when I talk about being a polymath, trying to talk about everything that you don't know anything about, this is an example of that. So back to this. There's a mischaracterization with the history of the land.
The Arabs who had conquered the land basically left it barren. They never made it their own. It was a barren land. It really it was an empty land.
If you look at the land, it was a booming nation. It wasn't like freaking New York City, but there were port cities. Haifa was a port city. Jaffa was a port city. There were tens of thousands of people. They built a railroad track that connected Egypt, Lebanon, Syria. Like these weren't, just some people in tents. And this is just, let's get into this.
Paper at the time called Al Talib. That student newspaper joked in the run-up to 9/11 about renaming the newspaper Al Taliban and making Osama bin Laden editor-in-chief. They also, again, in rhetoric, supported Hamas, Hezbollah. They didn't make any bones about any of this. When I sought to write about this stuff as an undergrad for the UCLA Daily Bruin, which was the campus newspaper, I was told such columns would not be run. Those were the only columns I ever...
Okay. I wasn't there. I was 1 year old, debatably, around this time. I can promise you that's a mischaracterization what happened. That's not what happened, okay? No student... First of all, the credibility of a student organization, like, could we put that in its proper place? It's, yeah, students say things, and sometimes students are a little more raw, lacking nuance. Like, sometimes it's just not said correctly. But remember, there are a lot of viewpoints surrounding the U.S.'s involvement before 2001, and it's not all shining rainbows. And you have to understand that whoever was writing those things at the time may have thought something about Afghanistan or Saddam or Syria, or there's so many talking points that you just generalize right there by saying, oh, they wanted to rename it Osama bin Laden. I'm sure any of those kids wouldn't go to dinner with Osama bin Laden. Like, that's not their objective. They're probably just making honestly, a not funny joke, a joke that didn't land well.
Wrote for the UCLA Daily Bruin, and this is back in 2000, 2001, that the Daily Bruin ever refused outright to run. Story number 2 is about a decade ago. My wife and I visited London. It happened to be Boxing Day. I know anything about Boxing Day, but it turns out that everything in London was basically closed, everything except for Madame Tussauds Wax Museum. Well, we had nothing better to do, so my wife and I went there. And inside the wax museum, there were the usual bevy of famous figures. In the final room, there was a wax of Albert Einstein. So we took some funny photos, and then we turned around. And what we saw was 3 young Muslims, 2 women and a man, They were also taking pictures with the Einstein wax. They were strangling the Einstein wax. Well, it occurred to me that perhaps that might have something to do with the fact that Einstein was pretty obviously Jewish. But I brushed it off because I'm a good Westerner. Maybe these guys just hated the general theory of relativity.
Amazing. He's a good Westerner. A good Westerner. That's what made you brush that off. Not the fact that these kids were probably idiots. Or they uninformed, uneducated, ignorant, insensitive, unsympathetic. They just lacking nuance. No, you're a good Westerner. That's just garbage verbiage. That's literally what that is, because it makes it out to be like these people represent the opinions and the feelings of all other Muslims around the world or around America. That is just annoying propaganda, because it's not based in anything. Like, meet a normal Muslim. I'm talking one that's your neighbor, one that's at the gas station pumping gas, one that's at the local Kmart, if there's still one open in today's world. I mean, bro, most people are just trying to get their lahma and go home and make ruz and eat food and just chill, bro. Like, nobody is nobody is out here trying to be. First of all, a lot of Muslims that come here aren't that political to begin with. Most of them come here for money. Most of them come here for a better life. They really don't care about the politics of a nation. I would say, in most Arab world eyes that come here, there is a level of corruption in the Arab world that to them is beyond their control and beyond anyone's fixing. So they come here and try to build something for them and their family. God, so sad. Let's continue.
Or something. Well, at the time, the museum also concluded with a wax of Adolf Hitler. Now, this wasn't a wax that my wife and I particularly wanted a photo with, but it turns out that these young Muslims did. This time, they got really buddy-buddy with the wax. They put their arms around Hitler. They posed smilingly with Hitler. Multiculturalism is a failure. It has always been a failure.
Dude, I love the thesis he just put there, and the whole, like, just amazing, educated, just every piece of, I'm losing my words. That was the most garbage rhetoric ever, basically. And let's understand why. These kids, he didn't say their age. He didn't say, first of all, what kind of Muslim were they, and what gives them the impression that they're Muslim. I'm going to assume they had the headscarf on. And lastly, if you grew up in America, and you tell me, and this goes for all races, that you never heard a Hitler joke, you would be lying out your teeth. Everyone experienced seeing or hearing a Hitler joke sometime middle school or high school. This is not something that is solely on Arabs or Muslims. I'm sure that some Muslims or Arabs made some stupid joke about Hitler, and it's disgusting, and I don't support it. But don't act like that's something really specific to them. In the Quran, it teaches that you should treat everyone equally. It's the same thing. It's literally the reason why Muslims get mad when they hear Judeo-Christian values. Judeo-Christian Muslim values are all the same. It's literally all predicated on the same God, the same prophets. I mean, the fact that it's separated, like these people are weird, but the Jews and Christians are together. There is more relating the Jews and the Muslims in practice than there are the Christians and the Jews. And it's the most frustrating thing ever.
Multiculturalism, the suggestion that all cultures are at root the same in quality and beauty and truth, it is a lie. That lie is dangerous. That lie leads to moral blindness. As we've been discussing the last few days, it leads to atrocities, murdered babies, raped women, kidnappings, beheadings. It leads to death. It leads to carnage. But multiculturalism doesn't just excuse evil abroad, it brings it home. Multiculturalism suggests that we in the West, in the United States, the UK, France, Germany, and the rest of the Western world, we have to open our borders. After all, if we don't, we're racists. If you believe that all cultures are morally equivalent, that all cultures are equally meritorious.
Racist to whom? What do you imply when you say that if we don't open our doors, who's we? Who exactly is we when he says that? And I really mean that. Who is we? And we all know what he's talking about. He's talking about pale-skinned, Caucasian people. And it just, I almost cussed. This is very upsetting. Because when he says something like that, it's so obvious in its nature. You're basically saying And this includes Hispanics. This includes the Chinese, or Asian countries, and Russians. Like, this includes everyone. Like, no one can come to America because they're possibly just looking for a better life for them and their family, more liberties, ability to talk, write, blog, anything they want without any repercussions from some governmental entity. Like, as an Arab, and my ancestry, half of it traces back to Egypt. This is where my last name comes in, Tontawi. And I wouldn't live in Egypt, bro. I wouldn't live in Egypt. Like, you could pay me $1 million, I wouldn't live there. You know why? Because you can't say anything you want. You can't just post stuff. You can't just be free. I mean, to an extent, especially if you have money. But that's what makes America so great. But no, to this guy, you come here and there's just terrorists in the wing. Like what Nikki Haley was saying. Like, we've let these guys in. Or these conspiratorial conservative Instagram pages that are now posting things like they're building the wall because they know something that we don't. It's like, bro, shut up. Like, these are the toxic viewpoints that caused, like, the Charlotte's riot a couple years ago, and Trump didn't denounce it at all. I mean, these are the type of things that led to the January 6th riots. Like, I'm not one to harp over situations that have come to America. The world is moving, and I think, like, you need to be very proactive in the way you judge things and just give it context and move on and don't dwell on it like it's an existential crisis. But this man is trying to start something when he talks like this. Multiculturalism isn't the reason why Israel and Palestine are at war, and it isn't the reason that you can indict all of Palestinians because of the actions of Hamas, which in itself isn't a singular group. There are multiple militias within Hamas. Where he's taking this is so unhealthy and non-progressive, and every ounce of me hates this. And what I want you to do is go to this page, Charlie Kirk. Charlie Kirk is a pundit, conservative, founder of Turning Point, garbage guy. Doesn't really know what he's talking about, but has read like one book. So he goes on like to post these things, like this photo about, I'll post it right here. So it's like 4 Muslim men, presuming Muslim men. I'm going to presume Palestinian too. And he does some like garbage caption like working age men here to fight or something like that. And it's just the most unhealthy thing. And I was going through the comments of this post, and it literally blew my mind that people are thinking and saying, typing, like, this is the stuff that I didn't think existed. And now I'm thinking, why aren't people telling me what they really think? Because if people really wanted to learn, people really want to dialogue, like wanted to learn, they would engage in dialogue. But the problem is that it's dangerous to have this kind of dialogue because things can get out of hand in about 2 seconds.
The only reason then to deny somebody entry is race, and that makes you a racist. There's a reason that multicultural advocates are open borders advocates. It's because their logic demands it. What difference would it make to you if migrants are arriving from the Gaza Strip or from Taiwan? Underneath, all cultures are the same. Well, that is ridiculous. And we all know it's ridiculous. We've all been afraid to say it for decades, even in countries where the leadership has recognized the failures of multiculturalism, broadly speaking. That same leadership has been totally unable to speak the truth about migration. And when they do, they are chastised by the media. This is why the media has pretended away disproportionate criminal activity from Middle Eastern and African migrants to Europe. To recognize the truth would be awkward. It might seem racist because we're not allowed to point out that it's not about race, it's about culture, and not all cultures are the same.
Not all cultures integrate into a society the same. They're not all treated the same once they walk into a society. And they're not also given the steps to success and the tools they need to become something once they're thrown into a new society. There's a difference here in, first of all, this multiculturalism argument and the race argument. The race argument is so embedded in our society that I don't even know how you could argue that race doesn't have a hand in how people will judge, treat, and influence you, and who you're going to be around to be influenced by. I mean, it's just, we seek acceptance, and by race, you seek acceptance. Multiculturalism, that encompasses a whole group of races sometimes. The most Muslims aren't even from anywhere in the Arabian world, like the Arab world. It's all from Indonesia. I'm pretty sure most of the Arabs live in Indonesia. And it's just important to remember that, like, when you say, like, it's dangerous to let them in here, what you're really saying is that they're going to bring terrorist ideology. because that's what's happening a lot, right? Is a lot of terrorist events are happening across America. Like, everything is bound to happen a few times. There are examples in every category of violence, no matter the race, gender, ethnicity, background, whatever. But to say that it's part of this growing problem is just it's an atrocity. And he's trying to basically draw this dichotomy between race and culture and give you this nice synopsis that just because you deny certain groups of people, you're not racist. It's about the culture. You have to understand this. Culture is not religion. So when you say that not everyone has the same culture, it's not about race, well, it's not about religion necessarily either. Because when you say culture, I'm not assuming Christianity. If I ask you, what is the culture of the United States? Don't tell me Christianity. You know what I think of? Beer, hot dogs, Hollywood, celebrities, Beyonce. It's not Christianity. The current president has a son that gets hookers, snorts cocaine off their asses, and our president before him paid a porn star to shut her mouth. Like, the idea that we really have some semblance of like this religious, amazing, super pure country. No, bro. Our culture is freedom, liberty, the ability to express, assemble, write, do whatever you want. That's America. This is the worst beginning of a show and most racist filtering out. The people that are left after this point have an agenda, have an objective, and have viewpoints that are so unmalleable. These viewpoints are incapable of being brought in to a public dialogue in any sense, because no one can look at this, hear this, and say, yeah, that's intelligent. This is only 3 minutes into a video that I skipped out of. I'm not going to finish it. I totally disavow and will never listen to another Ben Shapiro clip in my life. And I think that I have a lot of reflecting to do about what I believe about the world, because this is not it. This is hateful commentary, and this is unresponsible for him to do this to millions of people around the United States, of whom have helped build this country, participate in all types of industries. Like, this is just ridiculous, and I find this embarrassing to be American. So, Muhammad Tantawi, signing off.